Here we are, floating on planet Earth, revolving around a nondescript star in the corner of an apparently everyday galaxy, which is just one of hundreds of billions of galaxies, each of which has hundreds of billions of stars. How do you make sense of such a strange predicament?
Hello, I'm Dwight Nelson. Welcome to The Evidence. What's the strangest, most mysterious aspect of this amazing universe we live in? Is it its size, its beauty, its order? Or how about the idea that this universe had to be exactly, and I mean exactly as it is, in order for you and me to be here? Is there a reason why everything is the way it is? Could it be that the wonders we see in the night sky provide evidence that there is a God behind it all?
Some strange results have come up in about the last 20, 30 years, particularly in astronomy and also in quantum physics, which suggests that the universe actually may have a purpose, and some physicists are now suggesting it does have a purpose. And this has come out of some findings about the some of the fundamental numbers in atomic physics.
These are numbers like the mass, the weight of an electron, the weight of a quark, the strength of gravity, the strength of the electromagnetic field. About 20 numbers that describe those and other parameters, features of our world, but nobody knows why it is that those numbers have the particular values that they do. Now, you could easily say, yeah, who really cares? You change the mass of the electron by a little bit more, a little bit less. Does it really matter? And the answer is it does. See, it turns out that if you imagine that we had 20 dials right here, and we could fiddle with those 20 numbers at will, even a small change to the values of the known values of those numbers would cause the world as we know it to disappear.
For example, if we go back to, say, 1 second after the Big Bang, at that point, the expansion rate and the mass density have to have been adjusted to each other just right, so that the universe is just at this critical point. If the universe at that point were expanding just 1 part in the 15th decimal place faster, the universe would have flown apart without galaxies ever having had a chance to form. On the other hand, if the expansion rate were just a little slower than what we think by one change of 1 in the 15th decimal place, then the universe would in fact have expanded to a maximum size and collapsed. We would never have even reached the time in the universe at which we're living.
Isn't that amazing? A change of 1 to the 15th decimal place, faster or slower, and the universe in which we're now living wouldn't exist. How can such careful calibration ever be the result of chance? Physicist Mickey Kutzner doesn't think it is.
Suppose that we had 25 or 30 walls that were standing in front of us, and each wall was a mile or so long. Suppose that you were told that each wall had a hairline crack in it, but that it was totally random where that hairline crack would occur. Wouldn't it surprise you if you peered into one of those hairline cracks and you could see daylight through the other side of those 25 walls? That would tell you that all of those hairline cracks were lined up perfectly. That's the same thing that we have in the universe, with all of these fundamental constants adjusted just right for life to exist in the universe. The chances of any one of those are slim. The probability of all of them occurring at once is extraordinarily unlikely.
A natural question that many people ask when confronted with this is, who designed it so that they all fit together so perfectly to give rise to our world? Is it merely an accident? Is there some force of nature that's out there that requires the universe to be as it is? Or is there some conscious being behind it all that has dialed things in a manner to allow the world as we know it to come into being?
Good question. The world as we know it does appear very finely tuned to the universal laws of physics. But does this apparent fine-tuning indicate a designer? Some physicists say no. Others disagree.
I mean, some physicists say, well, all that means is the only universe we could observe is one that worked. If the universe had collapsed after 4 weeks, we wouldn't be here to observe it. So we can only observe a universe where these numbers are exactly right, which means that the chances of the universe existing are 1 in a zillion.
Now, some would say, maybe that's evidence for a designer. Maybe there is a divine being, a God. God out there has set those numbers at just the right values so that we could exist. We don't know if that's the right answer, and we're not ready to accept that yet. We, as scientists, at least many of us, feel that we will ultimately come to an explanation from the laws of physics for why those numbers have the values that they do, but it is incredibly striking. It's remarkable that somehow, we don't understand it yet, somehow they have just the right values to give rise to the universe that we see around us.
We can't use science to either prove or disprove the existence of God. What we can do is look for evidence that suggests that we're not here out of total random events. And to me, the arrangement, the special balancing of the fundamental constants, the fundamental forces of nature, tells me that there is a being there that has put this package together, which has constructed this universe, someone outside the universe that was thinking about us and put it together for our benefit.
In a sense, if you will, religion, theology gives us our best explanation, at least for some people, for the why questions. Why is there a universe from the point of view of meaning? Science can't ever answer a why question like that, I don't think. The best science can do is tell us how. How does something work? How did the universe come into being? How did it evolve from way in the beginning to the form that we now see? But not why. You could imagine that there is no universe. There are no people. There is nobody to ask the question. And from that perspective, science will always come up short if you really want to understand why. Why is it here at all?
The fine-tuning of the universe is one example of its many wonders. Another example is so common we see it all around us all the time. When we come back, we'll talk about the wonder of light. Albert Einstein taught us that time and space are related by light. Imagine you and I hitch a ride on the Starship Enterprise, traveling at the speed of light. Now remember, at the speed of light, time stops. So if we look out the window while traveling at this speed, we would be aware of the past, the present, and the future all at once. This bizarre universe, which seems absurd to us, is the very universe described by quantum physics.
Classical physics seems to want to get any kind of mind or consciousness or observer or anything spiritual out of the equation altogether. It's really basically a materialistic point of view. Quantum physics says that even material itself is not materialistic, that we can't understand matter itself in a purely materialistic way. Quantum physics is really pointing to or indicating a direction for spirituality to take. It's pointing to where spirituality and science might find a common ground.
The concept that there is something outside the material world becomes even more evident when you consider light. You see, light has the ability to behave in a seemingly conscious manner, to actually transmit information across the entire universe instantly. Consider this. In 1997, a Geneva researcher created a pair of twin light photons and sent them flying in opposite directions along optical fibers. When one photon hit a mirror, it was forced to make a random choice to go one way or the other. Whichever way it went, its twin photon, already 7 miles away, always instantaneously took the very same option. Instantaneous is the key word here. The reaction of the twin photon was not delayed by the amount of time it takes light to travel 7 miles. Other more recent experiments support this finding. In fact, physicists now believe that an entangled twin particle will know what its partner is doing and instantaneously mimic its actions, even if the pair live in separate galaxies billions of light years apart. Since we've been told that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, how does one photon on one side of the universe know what the other photon on the other side of the universe is doing? Instantly.
Non-locality is being discussed by a lot of physicists nowadays. And what that means is that the information at any point in the universe is accessible to any other point without any kind of a time delay. So we have now a growing concept of what a non-time-space source is, what this thing we call consciousness or God is, that it exists without linear time and without space, and yet contains the potential for everything that exists in our world.
So it seems that any information at any point in the universe is accessible to any other point without any kind of time delay. Isn't that amazing? And here's something else that's amazing. Many of us think that the atom is the smallest element of matter. or the electron or the quark. But there's a whole new theory suggesting something much, much smaller than a quark. That theory is charmingly called string theory.
This theory suggests strongly there's a little filament of vibrating energy. The filament kind of looks like a string. That's why we call it string theory. And the great idea is that just like the string on a violin or a cello can vibrate in different patterns, which our ear senses different musical notes, the little strings in string theory also can vibrate in different patterns. Now, we don't hear them. Rather, we see them as different particles. So the electron is a string vibrating in one pattern, one note. A quark is a string vibrating in a different pattern. And in that way, all of matter arises, in a sense, from the notes that the little fundamental strings in string theory can play.
It's like in a synthesizer. You reduce a sound to lots of different little sounds. Each one is a waveform, a smooth waveform. Everything in the universe can be reduced to one of these waveforms.
Now, an important question is, can you actually see these little strings? No, not yet, and perhaps maybe we never will, because according to this theory, strings are really, really tiny. Just to give you a sense of how tiny, if you were to take a single atom and magnify it to be as large as the entire known universe, a little string in string theory would magnify under the same scale factor to be the size of a tree. So a tree is to the entire universe as a little string is to an atom.
I think it's intriguing to picture a God who would create a universe filled with tiny musical notes, each vibrating in harmony as a symphony of creation. But when I think of mind-boggling thoughts like this, another question always boggles my mind. Why am I aware of all this wonder in the first place?
So one of the big questions at the moment that's confronting scientists is, how does consciousness arise from matter? We all know we're conscious. I mean, each and every one of us. We have experiences, we have feelings, we're aware of our bodies, we dream at night. But there's absolutely nothing in physics or any other science, neurophysiology or anything, which says that any one of us should ever have a conscious experience. And the question that everybody's asking is, how does consciousness, which is totally immaterial, arise out of matter, which is totally unconscious?
There is a non-physical component to all of life, and that we are at the same time spirit, electromagnetic energy, and matter. I like to look at those three elements of our composition, spirit, matter, and electromagnetic energy, as kind of a keyboard. Think of a piano keyboard, where matter is in the low keys, electromagnetic energy is in the mid-range, and spirit or consciousness is up in the highest range. We're playing the whole keyboard. But as we play, spirit transmutes itself into electromagnetic energy, which in turn transmutes into matter. And this is going on simultaneously all the time. So Einstein gave us the key to how matter and electromagnetic energy can transmute into each other with his famous E equals m² equation. We are looking now for the equation or the story or whatever it will take that can show us how spirit manifests as energy and matter.
I think that as we begin to understand consciousness better, I think then we begin to understand what all the great spiritual teachings have been saying. And what I'm interested in is the common core of all the teachings, and not just the Christian teachings, the Eastern teachings, the Islamic teachings. I think there's a very basic truth there that relates to the nature of consciousness. And it comes back to the fact that we create our own experience, and each of us wants the same thing out of our experience. Each and every one of us ultimately wants to be happy. We want to be at peace.
We are being led perhaps to a new form of spirituality, a new kind of spirituality. Not a spirituality based upon prejudice and fear, but a spirituality based on wonder and awe and recognition of how nature really works.
We are seeking to take the journey which humanity has been on